Today is Saturday, March 28th, 2015. My name is Eliza Becker, and I'm the director of the American Jewish Peace Archive. Today I'm with Lilly Rivlin at 55 Bethune Street in New York City. Would you like to introduce yourself?
As what? Just Lilly Rivlin. I live at 55 Bethune. I have been involved in Arab-Israeli conflict, I think, since my birth. What comes to mind is I went on the Fellowship of Reconciliation trip led by Alan Salamano. That could have been 1976. And everybody introduced themselves. And that was my introduction of myself, that I was born into this conflict.
What do you mean by that?
It means, is that going to bother? Do you hear that? Pretty sure that was... I have to check it. It was either 1975, the trip, Fellowship of Reconciliation, because that was very important.
Why?
We went to the Arab countries. That was the main thing. We went to Lebanon, Syria, Egypt, and Jordan. And that was before most people had gone to the Arab countries. Now, I have to say that people ask me, are you an Israeli citizen? And I'm not, because at the age of 17, I decided that I'm not going to be an Israeli citizen because I wanted to go to the Arab countries. It was very clear to me that I had to do this. And so on my passport, it is written born in Jerusalem, because I am born in Jerusalem. So I can tell you a funny story. We're on the bus, and we are being held at the Jordanian checkpoint before we cross to Israel. And a Jordanian officer gets on, and he's got a passport in his hand, and he says, "Who is Lilly Rivlin?" And I raise my hand, and everybody goes silent. And as he walks towards me, I see the scene in Billy Liar, where he's marched out and shot. And by the time he comes to me, I'm really cool, because I've come to terms with the fact I may be shot. So then he looks at my passport. He says, "You were born in Jerusalem." "Yes." "Were your parents with you?" I couldn't believe that question. So I just said yes, but inside I was really laughing. And that was it. That's all. And the bus was allowed to go forward. So that was my experience on that trip. But that trip was very important, because it was there that we met with Palestinians, we met with Egyptians, Syrians. I sent a telegram to my parents, safe in Damascus, because we left Lebanon and we had to leave between shooting sprees. It was really very bad at that time. But the point I really want to make is that the patriarch, the Greek patriarch, really disturbed me. And that was one more event where I saw that the Palestinians were, or sometimes I could say the Arabs, really didn't want to see this Israel there.
Can you talk more about the Greek patriarch?
Well, I have to remember, but I found him very anti-Semitic. And I'm not afraid to confront. So I confronted. And I think other people, Alan Salamano has his memories of all this, so he might be somebody who even wrote it down. But it was very clear to me they didn't want Jews in the Middle East. And that's always been my problem. I say my problem. I'm sure there are other people who have the same issues. But I think that because I come from there, and because I have an identity as a seventh generation Jerusalemite, um, it, it was, it always got in the way in some way. I think I was more confrontative of Palestinians. I asked questions that other people were not ready to ask at that time.
Such as?
Such as, what is it? And I still haven't gotten an answer. Why is it so difficult for you to accept Jews in the Middle East? I still think that. And Gershon Baskin recently wrote a piece that I sent out. I have a list of 200 people, and I send out information about Israel-Palestine. I sent that out. That article is, what is the name of it? But basically, his attitude is, so already recognize the state. I have felt that many, many times. I cannot tell you how many times I have been to Ramallah and met with all the important people there before others were doing it, because I did it through merits. Through merits, and I went on symposiums. And I do feel there has been a change, a slight change. Saeb Erekat makes it very clear that the Palestinians recognized the state of Israel. Asking for recognition for a Jewish state is another matter. I sort of go along with Nomi Chazan, who says, why do we need them to tell us that we're a Jewish state? I can live with that. I think it's really true. I think I'm going to tell you about my relationship with Ramanda Tawil. Do you know who she is? Ramanda Tawil is the mother-in-law of Arafat. And we became good friends, let's see, after the Fellowship of Reconciliation. I went there as a journalist. I was a journalist at some point in my life, and worked for Newsweek, and I wrote I wrote articles. Okay. At that time, it's got to be after 1967. Let me think this out. One could drive to Ramallah easily. No checkpoints, nothing. By then, I had met Ramanda Tawil. But I had introduced myself as a New York feminist because I was associated with Ms. Magazine. I wrote for Ms. So she saw me as a New York Jewish feminist. I think it was when she said, at that point, that's how the Palestinian Charter was, the PLO, that all Jews who came to Palestine after 1917, could be 1919, had to leave. They could not live in Israel. Well, that really got to me. And I said, well, you know, my family has been here since 1809, and do you know about people like my family? There are many Jews. And I think that if I had any importance in all this, it's that I had that kind of identity, which, and the ability to say so and to confront, which made Palestinians or people involved in this community, very wide community of people who were trying to solve the conflict. And I know a lot of people because of my travels. So getting back to Ramallah, I used to spend weekends in Ramallah. And I met the mayors. She wanted me to meet Arafat. I didn't want to at a certain point. I really didn't want to meet him. I think that this is an essential point in the conflict, which is Palestinians and Israelis getting to know each other. That's my contribution, my theme. Unfortunately, since I've been involved in peace seeking, I don't know whether familiarity breeds contempt or whether it's the more you know each other. I think it helps. For sure it helps. I mean, now we have delegations going to Ramallah and even people from Ramallah coming to Tel Aviv, which is very exciting and wonderful. But the politics do not change. They change a bit. At the end, remind me to answer a question of why do I stay in there? Why do any of the activists keep on going when there aren't significant advances? So trying to get back to all the activities in which I was involved, I'm going to go all the way back to June 1967. When, after the war, when I remember being part of a collection of people, I don't remember where it was, but I remember thinking, the Palestinians and the Israeli Jews will show the world what coexistence looks like. I really felt that. Everybody else was involved in messianic dreams. That was my messianic dream. I mean, I had a messianic dream too.
Were you living in Israel?
I was in Jerusalem. Oh, yeah. So, going back and forth. I left. I don't know how you're going to make sense out of my story, but I did the research for O Jerusalem. I interviewed 210 people.
And O Jerusalem was?
A book called O Jerusalem by Larry Collins and Dominique Lapierre, which was the most important book for at least a decade after it came out. It came out in 1971, maybe 70 or 71. That I can tell you because I have the book, but we can check it. So I interviewed 210 people. I wrote up 4,000 and some pages. and it was about the siege of Jerusalem. What happened? I did the Jewish side, and there was a Palestinian on the Israeli side. I think probably it was at that time that I became an activist on the issue of Israeli citizens of Israel, because by then maybe, I'm going 67, yeah, okay, there was a military government responsible for the Arab citizens of Israel. That did not accord with my value system, which was developed being in Habonim, a labor Zionist youth movement, and then going to Berkeley, which blew my mind, and that was the beginning of many, many things. Let me be specific.
What year did you go to Berkeley?
I went to Berkeley as a graduate student. 1960...
1959?
Maybe 19... No, it could be... I have to look at my records. It could be 60. 1960. And there I was active in politics, slate politics, and I was one of the founders of the Graduate Student Association, which put me in a very strong position of programming. So I started something called The Gradualist Way to Peace, and I brought Amitai Etzioni, Arthur Waskow, we were all very young, Edward Teller, Aldous Huxley. I'm probably missing somebody, and brought that to the campus. So this gives you a sense of my peace activism was not only Arab-Israeli. It became that more and more with the years. But in Berkeley, it was Cold War. It included everything. I was a student of political science. My major was Indian studies, and I worked with a woman called Joan Bondurant, who wrote a book called Conquest of Violence. She was the person who, as far as I'm concerned, and I have an unfinished film on her, who introduced Gandhian technique and Gandhian philosophy to America. And King refers to her too. So, all right. What I was hoping you would do is help me connect, because there are many years here. I lived in England for 3 years, from 69 to 73. There I wrote the history of the Jews for television, which was never made. But I became really an expert on Jewish history, and I did that for David Putnam, very famous producer, and Sandy Lieberson. I flirted with Matzpen. Matzpen was a very left organization, and they had many people. They had a cadre in London. I was attracted to them, but again, I'm put off by far left thinking about Israel. It is not my way.
Why?
Because I don't think, I still call myself a Zionist, and it's aftzloches. Do you know what that means? It means on purpose. Because I do think, and somebody said this at the J Street conference, I think Zionism is the movement the independence movement of the Jewish people. It's okay. As a political scientist, I studied Indian independence. I know the story of Pakistan independence. I know this. My PhD thesis, which I never finished, was on, because it was too wide, was Ghana, Yugoslavia, Egypt. It was the neutralist bloc. But I was very familiar with other movements for independence, and I didn't see that Israel's desire for independence was any different than all the countries that were coming into their own after post-colonialism. So people on the far left did not think this way, and so I never found myself comfortable on the far left. I did move from labor to merits. I found that I was comfortable there. They were Zionists, they called themselves Zionists, and on social issues, that's where I felt comfortable. So I found my place. Now, getting back to the whole journey on the conflict. There are many places, what do I want to call them? Many posts, many places where I participated and found myself comfortable and I could talk. I flirted means I didn't take any official positions. And I'm an activist, so there's a reason why I didn't take official positions, meaning become an officer. So Brera is one. I went to Brera conferences. I spoke up, and again, I see my position as speaking up for the position that you hear as I go on and explain where I found myself comfortable.
Were you comfortable at Brera at the conference? That was 1977.
Yeah, comfortable enough. Comfortable enough. I went to meetings, so, but I didn't take a formal position. Part of it is lack of time, by that time, I'm pretty sure that I was already committed to merits, where I was president much later, but I have to look at the dates.
President of?
Of Merits, USA. Part of the thing is, I didn't tell you, I was assistant director, I did tell you, of New Israel Fund. Did I say that?
No.
Yeah, okay. I was assistant director of the New Israel Fund. That's 1985 to 87.
When did they, was that the very beginning?
Very beginning, here in New York. Now, I attended the Road to Peace conference, which I hope you interviewed Esther Cohen and Donna Neville. I was comfortable. Again, always with the caveat, if they go too extreme, I'm not comfortable. I also attended and was vocal in a conference in Washington, D.C. I forgot the name of that conference, but Avishai, God, he's a friend of mine. Oh, Braverman was there. It was the first, I think it was the first conference on
The New Outlook Conference in 79?
Yes, That's what it was, yeah. Okay, New Outlook Conference, the first one. I was active in that. Active enough that I was the one who was hired to close up the New Outlook office in New York. That's not something that I'm happy about, but I was part of New Outlook people. Then the road to peace was important. Somewhere along, I guess this is 1984. Okay, at least I can remember things from there. 1984, I started developing a concept that the conflict, if you want to resolve the conflict, you have to go back to the Sarah and Hagar story. I then did psychodrama in various places, including Eilat Chaim,
Which is
a retreat in the New York area. And all the people that you know, I mean, Arthur Waskow, and those people were part of Eilat Chaim. I worked on the psychodrama concept for a while. I even went and became a student of psychodrama so I could carry out these sessions. To my knowledge, I was the first person who did that.
Can you talk about what that is?
Yeah, I say to them,
Them is
my audience, the people I'm working with, I say to them, I think that the conflict is embedded in this story. Can you help change this story? Can you take on the role of Sarah and Hagar, and we'll act out how you can change it? Well, there were some wonderful moments in the workshops that I led, but I concluded that it was only lesbians, and I'm not one, who could solve the problem, because they were able to say, well, we can bring them up together. Others didn't. So I was doing that from a certain time to a certain time. I have to go back and look at records. But then, something I do remember is that Esther Broner and I were invited to participate in the Sinai Gathering, representing the feminist religion. And we did this workshop concept that I had developed by then on Sarah and Hagar with the Egyptian women who were there, Arab-Israeli women who were there, and then all other women, but with the so-called enemy, because those were the important people.
What was the Sinai Gathering?
That pivotal. A woman called Maureen Kushner, who lives in Jerusalem, persuaded Dean Morton of St. John the Divine to get behind this, and she invited all the major religions, Sufi, very important pair, somebody or other. I'm forgetting names, so that's why it's difficult to interview me at this stage. Pair, he was the head of the Sufist movement, Buddhist, Christians. Zalman Schechter was there. He was wonderful. Marshall Meyer was there. And it was the first time that Jews and Muslims came together in such a gathering. I think it was pivotal because it broke barriers. And those are the barriers that were most important. It's me trying to tell you about going on the Fellowship of Reconciliation trip, coming back to Israel. Nobody asked me to tell them about the trip, except my cousin, Avi, the brother of the president today, who is a Likudnik, who was curious enough to bring together a group of about 20 people to hear about my experience. It was before Sadat. That I know. Could have been 1977, but it was before Sadat came. And I thought then that the problem was, well, Israelis don't know Palestinians, and Palestinians don't know Israelis. I was convinced that that's what it was about. But now, 2015, I said this before in this interview, I don't think it's that, because now we know each other. There are enough Israelis and enough Palestinians who have met. Certainly there are enough organizations going now where Palestinians and Israelis talk and meet. So it's political. It's political. Other important oh yeah, yes. I was involved with a group of women who came together trying to solve the conflict. I don't think we had a name, but it was part of getting to know people on the other side, which always makes it easier. If you know people, then you can communicate. We had several meetings here in New York. One woman was Shulamit Koenig. Have you met her? You might want to interview her. Koenig. She went on to become very active in human rights. That was her way of dealing with it. But she was, in my view, and I want to say anti-Israel. She's Israeli. She was more critical than I am willing to go. So there's always a point beyond which I won't go. I won't do the BDS, but Meretz, now Partners for Progressive Israel, does boycotts settlement products. So those are my limits. And I always say to people, I'm not going to walk away from Israel, because I have many, many friends who say to me, I've had it. I've had it. I don't want to have anything more to do with Israel. Well, I think that's the big difference between me and others. Although probably people who came from there and lived there. I mean, I lived there as a married woman from 1963 to 69. I think they probably feel the same way I do. They're not going to walk away from it. But it's very hard at this point to justify, and that's why the political is the most important way for me to deal with it, because I can criticize the present government without becoming a person who delegitimizes Israel. And that's very important for me. I won't go there. Okay, now my filmmaking, because that's pretty important. In 1984, when Esther and I went to the Sinai Gathering, that's when I started making a film called, well, it became that, Can You Hear Me? Israeli and Palestinian Women Fight for Peace. At first, it took off from the Sarah and Hagar story. And I went out into the desert and I rented a donkey and brought a Bedouin and had it. I did the works, and recreated a scene of Sarah and Hagar with two actresses, one playing Sarah and one playing Hagar. And that was going to be part of my film. That started me going back every year, filming women involved in the peace movement, to the point that by I was working a long time on that. Could be up to 2006. It's a long time for a film. And I interviewed Leah Shaktiel, I interviewed Terry Greenblatt, I interviewed Maha Abudaya, I interviewed many of the women involved. And I had a lot of material, and I couldn't control it all. Became beyond able to see the structure. And that began my relationship with a woman who I've worked with since then. It was a TV pro and a hard-assed co-producer. And she said, "Throw away the Sarah and Hagar." And it killed me. But the film basically is about the women who have been struggling all these years in the peace movement to arrive at some resolution of the conflict. And these are the women that everybody knows by now. Galia Golan, she's not in my film, but and Nomi Chazan has a still. But I think that for me, working with the women on trying to resolve the conflict became the way to go. And that's what I did. The film finally came out 2006. I had Deborah Winger narrate. HBO said about it, "We know about the conflict, and it's only women," and they turned it down. So these are some of the things that come up for me, because I'm a feminist, and I was very early on in the conflict resolution part, and it's hard to find a place. So then Heather told you about the first, it turned out to be the first. We had thought we were creating an ongoing international feminist conference. And means I was involved in working on it with Bella Abzug and Letty Pogrebin.
When and where was this?
This is Jerusalem, 1989.
It was international women or international Jewish women?
International Jewish women. And I pushed for bringing all the people I knew. So Phyllis Chesler was there, Esther Broner was there. But it was an amazing event because I think it was there that Alice Shalvey was so influenced. I think that was the year, but again, years not sure. So influenced by what we brought there that she started the Israel Women's Network. Okay, so peace was brought up then. It was a very important session. I hate to say it, but I don't remember. I was so busy organizing everybody. But the most important thing is we stood with the women in black and were a very vital part of one of their demonstrations. I think that feminists, Israeli feminists, and I was very involved with them, were the ones who pushed the resolution, pushed for trying to find a resolution for the conflict. It was among the feminists' conferences where I saw women, Arab Israeli women, Palestinian women, and Jewish women coming together before anywhere else. And that's really important to underline. And it was very interesting for me among the lesbian community. That's what, and I said that before, I'm not one, but I was attracted to the fact that they were able to overcome their national boundaries and talk about the issue.
This is the lesbian community in Israel?
In Israel, yeah. So you were at J Street. There was Nabila Espanol, who is a member of the Knesset today. So I'm joyful over that. And I met Nabila through these conferences of feminists trying to deal with the Arab-Israeli conflict. Marcia Friedman, of course, who I don't agree with now, but she's a dear, dear friend. So friendships connect people who don't agree. It's been a very long road. What do I want to say? I keep thinking we're almost there. We all know that the parameters have been described, set. We all know where we have to go. And we're still trying to deal with it. I used to think, and maybe part of me still believes, if women ruled, it would be different. And that's the question I explore in my film. Can you hear me? Israeli and Palestinian women fight for peace. It wasn't seen that much, mainly because I couldn't find a way for that film to be seen. I had a distributor. They never showed it. But it was the first film that dealt with it. With women making peace. I end on the note hoping that the women in Hezbollah, in Gaza, would be able to be part of this. but they haven't. So you meet me at this stage in my life where I think it's a Sisyphean struggle. I think there's no way out for either side. And eventually they will come to some kind of agreement. But I think of all the energy and time and life force, I mean, I'm speaking for myself, that those of us who have been active in the peace movement in one way or another, because there are so many people now involved in the peace movement, I would look forward to seeing it if your interviews come to any conclusions after you're interviewing the people who have been around for such a long time, how they feel about it. Based on people I know, we keep on doing it. Part of it is, what else are you going to do? If you're going to remain active. And my niche in filmmaking now is about women who are activists. So that's my way of dealing with it. I don't know if I have anything else.
What lessons would you like to share with young activists today?
Well, you know, it's interesting. My third film I've made 7 films now, but my third film in what I see is a trilogy, starting with Grace Paley, which will be shown at the New School Conference on Grace Paley in a couple of weeks, Esther Broner, and now Heather Booth. And it's ending with Heather Booth, this trilogy. And I'm trying to show that Heather Booth is an organizer whose art is organizing. And so if I talk to young people, which is what I want to do with this film on Heather, is this is her refrain. If you organize, you can change the world. And that's what this film that I hope to finish in a year and a half, maybe, will show. Even though the feminists who have been at the forefront of peacemaking have not succeeded. Where are they on the peace negotiations? 1325 passed in the UN.
Do you want to explain 13?
Yeah, Resolution 1325, which calls for women being involved in the negotiations. Where's that? That's what my film ends on. That's what I talk about Resolution 1325. Where is it? What are we doing? So it's that word Sisyphean keeps coming up for me, and that means you push the boulder up the hill, you get to the top, and it rolls down. That's not very encouraging. So I don't have encouraging words. I can only say there are a lot of people who have done it, and if you want to join those people, there's room at the table. There's no room at the table for negotiations.
Any other lessons for young activists starting out today?
No, I think that's the main lesson. The main lesson is if you organize. Heather says you can change the world. I say maybe you can change the world.